I will leave it to Dr. Michael Shuman.
Yes, thank you. As Dr. Lord and Dr. Wren said, this is a great opportunity for us to get in front of you before your first exam. I'm not going to spend too much time telling you about our office, but you can safely know that our office is the Learning Assistance Center, and we're committed to helping students figure out what they need to do to be successful academically. And over the past few years, we're seeing more and more frequently students come into our office who are really feeling anxious about test taking. And so when they reached out to us to say, let's get in front of this group, in particular groups who maybe think of themselves as pre-med students that are going to be taking a lot of tests throughout their 4 years at Wake. Let's see if we can get ahead of them early on and give them the skills and the strategies that they need to be successful in these classes. So today, for the first half, the first few minutes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the science of learning, a little bit about why and how to make enduring memories. And then the second half of today, we're going to start talking a little bit more about the actual prevention of the panic attack and working with performance anxiety. Sound all right? It's going to be good? My goal is today, when we leave, for you to have some very specific strategies that you can use yourself, even tonight, that might start to help make you feel more prepared for your first exam. But let me ask a question. This is a big group, which is super, but I want you to turn to someone next to you. It could be 2 people, 3 people. First of all, how many of you are first-year students? Do we have a majority of first-year students? Almost everyone? Great. All right, so turn to someone next to you and just take a minute or two and talk about how you prepared for your last exam. What did you do to study for your last exam? So I already heard some good stuff. I know that was only a minute or two, but right away I heard some really good ideas. Would someone be brave enough to start us off? Give me a little bit about how you or the person you talked to studied for their last science exam. Yes, in the back.
I just read the textbook.
You just read the textbook, all right? Just read text. Okay. Who else? Yes, up front. Practice test. My guess is that you did better on your last exam than our friend on the top row, but I won't ask. Actually, you might have done great, but you'll see why in a minute, why practice tests are really the ultimate in preparing for exams. Yes?
Reviewed notes.
Reviewed notes, all right? From what?
Just personal notes on the textbook.
Personal notes. All right, and where are you from?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Excellent. I just got back from San Francisco. In fact, what I'm talking about came from a conference I went to in San Francisco. This is great. And then where are you from? Winston-Salem. Even better, right? Where'd you go to high school?
Parkland.
Parkland. Great. Well, welcome. Right? Up the road. And then back here, where are you from?
Easton, Pennsylvania.
Easttown, Pennsylvania, which is near Philadelphia. Got it. How about one more? One more, or give me 2 more. Back here in the, yes.
I use flashcards.
Flashcards. Great. One more. Yes.
Bought a Physics for Dummies book.
You bought Physics for Dummies. All right. Now, Physics for Dummies, where are you from? Fayetteville, North Carolina. And flashcards, where are you from? From Concord, North Carolina. And you have something you want to say.
Oh, I was just going to say I reviewed old tests.
And reviewed old tests. Great. Now, depending on how Easttown did on just read the textbook, the rest of these have something in common. What is it? Can you tell me?
Active.
Exactly right. All of these are active study strategies. And one of the takeaways that you're going to get after hearing me talk today is the more active you make your learning, the more likely you are to remember it. It's more enduring, right? Very, very simply put, if this is our brain, right? Our brain takes in information through our 5 what? Senses, which are sight, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching, right? Most of the time, this information comes one in and goes right out the other, right? We're bombarded with stimuli all the time. For example, listen. What did you hear? Pins clicking. Yeah, I didn't hear much. This is a pretty quiet room, right? But I heard some pins clicking. But in that moment, if someone said, hey, free pizza and donuts right now in the lobby, we'd be like, what? I'm going to get something to eat, right? Because that's something that's meaningful. We're taking that information in. Meanwhile, we're not really paying attention to the clicking of the pen. 5 minutes after this presentation, if someone says, hey, what was Dr. Shuman wearing? Chances are slim, although I'd like to think it's not a bad-looking shirt, but chances are slim you're going to remember that I had on a blue and white shirt and olive pants, right? But if I was wearing a shirt that said, I love Easttown, Pennsylvania, you'd have been like, what? He's wearing an Easttown, Pennsylvania shirt, right? Because it's meaningful. It's actually doing something with that information. So as you take in information, the key is to find a way to do something with it so that you can store it in your long-term memory. And we do that through making it active and through making it meaningful. Now, there are a few nuggets that I wish students would never forget. And if we could make a deal right now, it would be for you to find your ideal study environment. All right? And in fact, I might take it a step further and say, if you're willing to, if you're really taking this seriously and you want to make a difference in your academic performance, let's make a deal that you will never study in your room again. Some of y'all are already whining. I can see it, right? Is that something some of you are willing to do, to maybe consider not studying in your room? Why do you think that is? Too many distractions. How many of you are taking Psych 151? Right? Have you all already talked about conditioned response yet? It's one of the first things you get. How many can tell me about conditioned response? Do you remember that study with Pavlov? You remember it. What do you remember about it?
It's like when you're given unconditioned stimulus and then you condition yourself to respond a certain way to the conditioned stimulus.
And so what was his experiment with the dogs?
You would ring a bell or something, a dog would salivate.
Because he would been putting out dog food, ringing the bell, the dog would eat. Put down dog food, ringing the bell, the dogs would eat. Put down dog food, ringing the bell, the dogs would eat. No dog food, ring the bell, what happened? It's like, where's my dog food, right? The dog would salivate. They were able to measure right then and there, wow, this dog is now responding to a bell, even though there's no food to make the dog salivate. The same thing happens in your room. What kinds of things do you do in your room? Sleep. Watch TV. Netflix and chill. What else? Play video games, hang out with your friends. These are all things that we do in our room, and that's fine. That's what we associate with our rooms. When we walk in our room, you should be able to say, I'm home. I can chill. I can take it easy. If you try to introduce studying into that environment, it's incongruent. It's not going to work. So you find a place on campus that you do associate with getting work done, with schoolwork. And where might that be? The library, the classic place. And people are like, well, I don't like the library. The library has a wide variety of places to study. The first floor is kind of like a party social moment. Like there's not a lot of studying that goes on the first floor. But the further up you go, the more likely you are to be able to find a space where you can spread out and really associate it with studying. Other places on campus include academic buildings. Most of the academic buildings are open. You can get inside of a classroom, associate that space with being successful. You associate that space with learning and with doing your work. The coffee shop, Starbucks, campus grounds, go up to the law school. Think out of the box. You can go into the chapel. You can go to Scales. Find a place other than your room to study. All right? Now, what I am going to talk to you about, I've got 4 more slides I want to show you from this book right here. This is Make It Stick. And this is, for someone like me, I'm committed to learning and memory. This book is a jewel because it has collected hundreds and hundreds of studies that look at learning and memory. And basically we can say research tells us this about learning and memory. And so what I've done is I've found the 4 suggestions that resonate the most with me from this particular book. And I think that can be applicable to the work of college students. This first one is retrieval practice, which is a fancy way of saying practice test or a self-test, right? We know from empirical research that the testing effect is real, that the act of retrieving a memory changes the memory, making it easier to retrieve again later, all right? So if you were to take a course, if you had two different courses, and one course had regular quizzes in addition to maybe a final and a midterm and a final, and then another course that maybe just had a big final at the end of the semester, the more enduring memory, well, you tell me. I've kind of set you up. But of the two courses, which one do you think will result in more enduring memory? The one with mini quizzes or the one with just one test? Yeah, mini quizzes. Like I said, I set you up for that. But students who are quizzed more frequently perform better on long-term assignments, right? That's why practice tests and self-tests are really the foundation to preparing for tests. Anytime our brain is retrieving information that we've stored or that we've learned, we're retaining that information, right? So in the moment, it doesn't necessarily, it's not fun, right? Flashcards and practice tests aren't really fun. Reviewing our textbook, looking over notes, we sometimes think, oh yeah, this is it. This is the way I'm going to learn this information. But really putting forth the effort, the active approach, is how we make memories last. Spacing out practice and mixing it up. All right. So practice that's spaced out or interleaved with other learning. And interleave, if you think about a book, I think about pages being interleaved, like you mix up different subjects and different types of studying. So practice that's spaced out, interleaved with other learning, and varied produces better mastery, longer retention, and more versatility. But the benefits come at a price. It requires more effort. Again, whenever we have to study, we often are looking for the easy way out, right? But if we make it a little more difficult for us, or if we combine it with other types of other disciplines that we're studying, we're going to find that it leads to mastery, longer retention, and more versatility. And there are a couple examples of experiments in this book that I thought I'd share with you that stuck with me. This first one is kind of a sweet one. It may be because I've got a 7-year-old at home. But if you can imagine a bunch of 8-year-olds, all right? And we take half of these 8-year-olds on one, and we put them in one PE room, and we take the other half in another PE room. And so for 12 weeks, they're going to practice tossing a beanbag into a bucket, right? That's the skill. So this first group, Group A, all they do is practice tossing a beanbag into a bucket at 3 feet. That's all they do for weeks. Well, hopefully they do some other things, but that's the skill that they're being taught is tossing a beanbag into this 3-foot bucket. The Group B, they get to vary it up a little bit. They've got a bucket at 2 feet and then a bucket at 4 feet. So they get to practice some at the 2-foot bucket and they practice some at the 4-foot bucket. At the end of the 8 weeks, they test all the kids on the 3-foot bucket. All right? Now again, I know I'm leading you a little bit. But which group? Was it Group A that practiced only on 3-foot buckets, or Group B that practiced on 2 and 4 but never on a 3-foot? Which group did better, was more accurate, tossing into the 3-foot bucket? B, which was which group? This group? Yeah. Does everyone agree with that? You think B? Okay. Why do you think it's B?
Me?
Well, yes, you.
Because you said practice is good if it's spaced out and like mixed up. So
Right, because you can read, and that's what I said. Now, we often think about like practice makes perfect, and I guess it's Gladwell that wrote the 10,000 hours of practice and before you can be perfect at something. But really, the idea is practicing the same thing over and over is kind of low-level learning. You're not really learning much more than how to toss a bucket at 3 feet. But when you've got the 2-foot and the 4-foot, you've spread it out a bit. It may feel a little bit challenging in the beginning, but in the end, you actually end up being more accurate. The second study might be appealing to those of you who are thinking about medicine as a career, right? And this is a fascinating study that looked at med students that finished med school. They were in their surgery residency, all right? And they were actually being taught a skill that they were going to need in order to do their work, microsurgery, all right? Reattaching tiny vessels on rats. That was the assignment. Now, it's common practice in these residency programs to often teach skills all together at one time. But this one research study looked at different methods of teaching. And with the first group, They taught them 4 specific different techniques on how to reattach tiny vessels, all in one day. Spread out, but in one day. The other group of students, they were taught the 4 different strategies, the 4 different techniques, but they were spread out by a week. All right? And then another month passed, and they tested all of the residents. Right? I'm leading you, but talk to me. Which group do you think did better? The group that learned it all at once? No. In fact, when tested, 18% of them destroyed the vessels they were trying to reattach beyond repair. So not only did they not learn how to do it, they actually messed it up. I mean, this was something they weren't even able to do. But those who had the different skills spread out over time mastered the skill. Which also makes me sometimes want to ask when I'm at the doctor's office, talk to me a little bit about your residency training, because I don't know. All right, embracing difficulties. Now, short-term impediments that make for stronger learning have come to be called desirable difficulties, right? I alluded to that earlier when I mentioned practice tests and making flashcards. But once again, another study that resonated with me. Baseball, according to a lot of sports physiologists and psychologists, is one of the hitting a baseball is actually really hard to do. I mean, maybe all of us can do it, but hitting a baseball well is hard to do. So Cal Poly has the baseball team, and they were interested in increasing their batting skills. So they did a little experiment, and they divided their team in half. Another study where one half of the team practice hitting 15 changeups, 15 fastballs, 15 curveballs, right? So 45 pitches that they hit, 15 in a row. And people are nodding their heads. Maybe you know where I'm going with this. And so they would hit the 15 of one type, 15 of the other type, 15 of the other type, right? For 6 weeks. They did this twice a week for 6 weeks. And they were getting good, right? Because after about ball 12, ball 13, you know exactly what it looks like. You know exactly what you're going to do. The other group, they also had those 45 pitches, but they were all mixed up. The changeups, the fastballs, and the curveballs were all mixed up. So the hitter never knew what they were going to be hitting, right? So in the moment, this group of students, these baseball players, were really frustrated because they could see what their peers were doing. They were killing it because they knew exactly what to do. But these guys were struggling to be quite as good as the other team. I mean, the other group of baseball players. But at the end of the study, the group that had the desirable difficulties, the guys that had the pitches all mixed up, actually had a significant increase in their batting skill, right? Why do you think that is? Why does that? I mean, that doesn't really make sense to us, does it? But the science tells us it does. Why do you think that is, though? Give me an idea of why you think that might be. Sure.
Well, in a game, you have different thoughts. You don't know what to think. Or if you practice in a similar scenario, you'll be better in the game. Because, again, you don't know that.
Right, and you don't know what to expect necessarily, but you know that you can't predict what's going to happen. Exactly. Anything else? Yes.
It might teach you to think quicker, so to recognize something sooner than versus like if someone has seen the same pitch over and over again. If you're used to seeing different pitches all the time, you can recognize different pitches sooner.
Yeah. Do you remember earlier when I said that retrieval increases retention? It's the same thing. The more we're having to think back, now how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? The more often we do that, the stronger that pathway is. So durable learning. I really like that example because we often, again, want to make things easy for us. But when we're faced with those really hard problems, like think about a chem problem or a biology problem or something in math and science where you're really stumped. And after you talk to your friends about it or your roommate about it or your instructor, your professor, whomever, and then you finally solved it, you're probably likely to remember that, right? Because you really pushed through it. This final one, attend and elaborate. So with this one, memory is about connections and relating it to what we know. The more elaborately we encode information at the moment of learning, the stronger the memory. All right? So I'm going to get a little personal here. How many of you remember your first kiss? Right? Most everyone. Maybe some of you haven't been kissed yet. Maybe this will be your special week. I don't know. But the first kiss for a lot of people is pretty memorable, right? Now, some of you might not have been in the 5th grade at Jelly Bean's roller rink with the entire 5th grade singing, "Kiss her, kiss her, kiss her." Some of us may have had that be their first kiss experience. But it's something we really remember because it's a really elaborate moment. Like when certain things are happening in the moment, we're much more likely to remember it. This also works on kind of the frightening end. If any of you have ever had a terrible car accident or a situation that just was frightening, that's often a memory we remember because it elaborately took place when we encoded that information. So the stronger the information, the stronger the moment of learning, the stronger the memory. Now, I know that's going to be hard. I think about working with the med students I work with and their bugs and drugs class, microbiology, where they've got to memorize just tons of information about drugs and about bugs. But when you can make this information more meaningful, you're more likely to remember it. When you can attend to it, when you can elaborate on it. And so the 3 examples here, this first one is, I know you know this, but if you can teach someone else the information, if you can talk about this information to someone else, then chances are you know that information. In medical school, you might know this, but often the model they use is see one, do one, teach one, right? So you see a procedure, someone demonstrates a procedure, you do the procedure, right? But then you teach the procedure. So if you can teach that information, you're much more likely to remember it. And incidentally, when you're studying with other people, what do you think is the magic number for a study group? What do you guess? I see a 5, I see a 3, I see a 3, I see a 4. 3 is the magic number, all right? Yes, it is. It's the magic number, all right? Why do you think 3 is the magic number? Because with 2, you run the risk of talking about movies, right? Because there's no one else to sort of interrupt you. Or if one person is wrong and they're teaching the other person incorrect information, then you've got 2 sad losers, right? But with 3 people, you bring in an opportunity to triangulate the data, perhaps. Or you bring in a third person to bring in a new opinion, to prevent the conversations to derail. And then if you go to 4 people, then you run the risk of having a party or the 2 conversations sort of happening in parallel. So this magic number is 3. So you can kind of file that one away as you start to look for your study groups. The second one, the myth of multitasking. College students at Wake Forest tend to think of themselves as really good multitaskers. I can do a lot of things at once. In fact, some of you are nodding, right? Is there someone in here who thinks of themselves as a pretty good multitasker? Someone I haven't heard from yet? How about someone who wants to volunteer? You started to raise your hand, didn't you? She's turning around. Would you like to be my volunteer? Would you do it for me?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. All right. So do you think you're a good multitasker? No. Well, we're going to see for everyone to watch. All right. So what I'm going to have you do is count to 26
Okay.
and say your alphabet as quickly as you can. Okay? So when I say go,
Yeah.
you'll count to 26 and then say your alphabet, and I'm going to time you.
Okay.
So the faster the better. On your mark, get set, go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z.
Not bad, right? Thank you for volunteering.
My roommate.
Her roommate, right? So 14 and a half seconds. Not bad. So now, what I'd like for you to do is demonstrate your multitasking ability. And I'd like for you to alternate between the number and the letter. So 1, A, 2, B, 3, C. Y'all are all good multitaskers, so you should be able to do this. 14 and a half seconds. On your mark, get set, go.
A1, B2, C3, D4, E5, F6, G7, H8, I9, J10, L.
14 and a half seconds. I will say, I do this a lot with students. Anybody who knows me has seen me do this because I think it's hilarious to watch people to try to do this. But actually, you did a really nice job. That's a really good job. But it was pretty hard, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, no one can really do that. Try this at home a little bit later. I mean, you're trying to do it right now. But it's really hard to do. And what it illustrates is it's simply not possible to maintain 2 different tasks. Our brains are simply not wired to maintain 2 different tasks like that. So the takeaway here is focus on just one thing at a time and do it right. Right? Try not to do so many things at once. Focus on one thing and do it right. The last thing I want to mention is you can be exposed to information on a regular basis all the time, and you still don't know what it is. Right? So for example, does anyone know what a penny is? Like a 1-cent coin, right? We all know what a penny is, right? We all know what a penny looks like. We can visualize it in our mind right now. Is there any question about what a penny looks like? We're certain we know what a penny looks like? Some of you are starting to doubt it, but which one is a penny? If this is a class full of people who know what pennies look like. Without pulling out your pennies now. All right. Does anyone feel pretty strong that they strongly, Easttown, Pennsylvania threw his hand up. You think it's L. How many of you agree that it's L? It's not H. It's not I. What? No. What? A. Yes, it's A. A is the penny. But it shows if you had spent time paying attention to details throughout your life when you see these pennies, which again, this generation maybe doesn't see as many pennies as I did. But it's fascinating to think about. We don't know what a penny looks like, right? We can't pick a penny out. The final thing I want to mention to you, and I think it will nicely translate into what Dr. Cardi is going to spend the rest of this time talking about, is getting specific to this anxiety piece, right? And there is I met this researcher, and actually I subsequently did a book discussion with some other faculty staff at Wake about managing performance anxiety. And she had this, I thought, really cool study that demonstrated that expressive writing boosts the performance of anxious students in math testing situations. And so in her study, she had students that had already identified as being math anxious, right? So they knew they already had performance anxiety around math. And so half of the test takers were told to sit quietly for 7 minutes before starting the test. And half of the test takers were told to write expressively about this anxiety for the 7 minutes before the test. Right? And afterwards, those students who wrote about their anxiety had statistically significantly higher scores. They just simply did better than those who sat quietly. And I asked her if she would send me part of, I don't know if you can read this. I'll read it to you. I usually don't, but I want to, since we're specifically talking about this, I'll read it to you. It says, when I first think about this upcoming final, I feel really stressed. I'm worried that it will be on everything that I don't know very well and that I haven't prepared enough. This really stresses me because I'm always worried about grades. I really like doing well, and when I don't do well, it upsets me. I also have really high standards. As I continue to think about the final, does this sound familiar to anyone, by the way? I relax significantly. I realize that it is only a test. I realize that I've studied enough. What I don't know, I don't. And I think that I know everything that I need to. I realize that I was blowing this final out of proportions. I don't have to worry as much. It's only one test. It won't affect my life drastically, so now I'm reconciled in terms of stress. I don't have to worry as much. It is not as stressful now. I know I will do well. Great, even. I know this stuff. I've learned what my teacher taught me. I don't have to worry. But there's still an undertone of stress. I'm still a little bit worried, but everything's okay. I know that I will do as well as I can. So it bumped up towards the end, but it's interesting to see how her anxiety or his anxiety abated as he or she wrote expressively about her anxiety. Right? And of course, as I told you earlier, the students who wrote before they took the test ended up doing better. And I wrote it. This was the book, Choke, What the Secrets of the Brain Reveal About Getting It Right When You Have to. At the end of this afternoon, I think we have some bookmarks that will also reiterate some of the things we've talked about. I saw you taking notes, which is a great active study strategy. But hopefully some of the things I've talked about will be something you can put into practice, like I said, as soon as tonight. And so to finish this off with the second half, Dr. Cardi talked to you a little bit more about performance anxiety, and I'll pass the mic.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
All right, that's actually really good segue. So as I was preparing for this talk, Well, the word choke came up a lot, actually. So I just want to point out that Dr. Shuman did a great job of just telling you some really great things that you can do to get prepared for your test, like what to do with the material that you're learning in your class, right? So that's a really important component to feeling prepared. But there's another component in order to be able to do well on the exam. Okay, so I want you to think about an athlete. Let's say either college level, professional level. Think about someone who's just super, super talented. And then when it came to that critical moment, the big game, they can't deliver. Or they haven't delivered. At least on a few occasions. Can you think of some examples? Yeah.
Tony Robbins.
Say a little bit about that.
Born Eagles fan, so hate Cowboys.
So you enjoyed it. You enjoyed seeing him choke. Yeah. What was going on with him?
There was a tough game in interception, last couple minutes on the game-winning drive.
Is he talented?
Yeah.
Talented, right? He's athletic. I assume he goes to practice. I assume he puts in the time, right? So he should be able to perform. So what happens?
He was too nervous.
So where's all that coming from?
Pressure.
Pressure. He can't handle the pressure. So I want you to understand that that's a really big piece of you being able to do well on these exams is being able to handle the pressure. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong impression that pressure is bad. It's not. In fact, we need it. So this shows this curvilinear relationship that we have between performance and pressure. So could you imagine taking a test with feeling this much pressure? Like, you probably wouldn't even actually show up to class to take the exam, is my guess. You're going to be, like, crashed out in your bed. You probably went out and had a good time the night before, because it really doesn't matter. But what most of us want to do is hit right here, right? That's what we want. So if we put in the time, we study the material, it comes time for the exam, we want to be able to perform. So we have to have a decent amount of pressure, sort of this sense of arousal. It's got to be, mental, physical, all that kind of thing. So you can get in a flow. Now, can you guys think of a time where you personally did really well in some kind of performance, either on a test, in a game, whatever? Okay, tell me about what that felt like. Anyone? What did it feel like?
Satisfying.
Was it, satisfying. Was there an ease to it? Sort of a...
Confidence.
You felt confident. Okay. So your thoughts, can you just describe what they were like?
Well, I was always having positive thoughts. I wasn't thinking negatively about what I was doing. I was focusing on what I was doing.
Nice. Nice. So in order to hit here, we need to have thoughts. Because remember, this is all a head game at this point. You've got the material. You've put in the hard work. Now it's your head game. So if you want to be able to perform well, have peak performance, those thoughts have to be positive. Were you focused on the present? Were you focused on what was happening in the moment? Right? Nothing else, right? Okay, what are you thinking about it in particular?
Oh, just a baseball game.
Okay. So it was like whatever was happening at that moment, not necessarily what happened 15, 20 minutes ago. You were just right there in the moment. Perfect. And single focused, just that one thing. Going back to what Dr. Shuman was talking about, if we're thinking about a ton of other things, then we're sort of only half in. All right. So what about those people who end up overshooting where they want to be and end up down here? Those are the people who are choking. I don't want you guys to choke in these exams. So have you had an experience where you choked? Yes. Anyone want to share? But that felt like probably not. You probably don't even like to remember those times. Yeah, go ahead.
My first AP exam.
What happened?
I got a 3. But I should have gotten a 5.
Okay. For for you, that felt like you choked. You bombed, right?
I thought I had.
You thought you had. Okay. And let me hear, what were you thinking about?
I lost the state wrestling championship.
What happened?
I was the #1 seed and I got pinned in the first round. Just because I messed up.
So, how were you feeling during that match?
Pretty crappy.
Like before you even started?
Oh, before I started, I was like really hyped up. I thought I was going to do well because I was ranked higher than he was, and I underestimated it.
Okay. So once you realized, oops, I underestimated him, and you were in the moment, then what? What happened to your thoughts?
Instant shift to disappointment and sort of upset instantly.
Any worry?
A lot of it.
A lot of worry? Yeah.
Got a funny one.
Okay.
My junior year in high school, I started playing golf, and my very first golf match, I went up to drive, and I missed completely.
And then what did you do?
Had to swing in, but
Had to swing again. But in the moment, you're probably feeling like, oh my gosh, no. Right? So all these examples, typically what's happening is that we have applied too much pressure. We're tanking. We're choking. So we have now negative thoughts. And I don't know if you guys recognize this, but a lot of the time what you're thinking about is the past. Oh my gosh, the last time this happened, da-da-da-da-da. Or if I don't do well here, then this is going to happen. I'm going to lose to this guy who's ranked lower than I am. Right? Then what will people think? Then what will happen? Then what will happen to scholarships? Then what will happen? So you can imagine even with like an exam like this, if you're putting so much pressure on this one exam and feeling like, if I don't do well on this exam, and you're in the middle of taking the exam, you have no idea like how well you're going to do. And you think, if I fail this exam, then I might fail another exam, and then all the exams, then the class, then I might fail other classes, then I might have a really bad GPA, then I probably won't be able to get into med school, then my parents are going to be disappointed, then nobody's going to like me, and I'm going to be poor, and I'm going to be living on the street. That is called catastrophic thinking, and it happens really fast. And it's hard to stop that train once it... Have any of you sort of seen your brains going that way? Fast, right? It's like, whoa. So one of the things I'll mention here in a few minutes is that you got to be aware of what is going on up here. Okay? So that you don't have these experiences of choking. So let's think about one of the main things I say is this idea of self-awareness. Need you to be self-aware of what you're saying to yourself in your head. That's where the power is. So the source of the pressure is not the test. The source of the pressure is not the professor. That mean, hard professor that throws out hard exam questions. The pressure is with you. So the more that you can recognize that you're the one driving up the pressure to a point where you're starting to choke. So, and Dr. Shuman was saying, start studying now. Well, do the same with the anxiety stuff. Start practicing that stuff now. Not whenever you're sitting in these seats trying to take an exam. It's got to be sort of like a daily way that you're learning how to manage your head game. You want to identify your triggers. So if I imagine one trigger that, well, a lot of students report this, and I bet you guys would say this too. They show up to the test early. And other students are here, and they're frantically talking about the material. Oh my gosh, did you do this test? Did you do that problem? What did you get? I didn't get that. Oh no. And you're feeling like the other person's like anxious energy, so you're all like amping each other up, and then finally you get in here and then, It's sort of a done deal. So if that seems like a trigger, and it would be for me, I would say stay away. Like, don't be late, but you also don't have to be so early and hanging out here and engaging in all that stuff. In fact, you could put on headphones. Didn't you tell me you would sometimes do that?
Oh yeah, I'll be talking more about that next week about test taking strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
earplugs.
Yeah, earplugs. Do whatever you can knowing what your trigger is. If it's like noise, if it bothers you to hear people turning their paper, you know, or clicking pens, or it bothers you to see people getting up and leaving, deal with that. Find a way to manage that so that it's less likely to take you out of your game. So, as I was saying, with that negative thinking when we choke, I said we often go past and present and all that stuff. We're jumping around. Well, what happens is only part of your cognitive resources are actually being geared towards the test. Let's say at best you've got 50% in the game. The other 50% is somewhere else. Like you're out that way thinking about the future and how it could turn out badly for you, or you're thinking about the past. You need to get present, people. This is what you're doing right here, right now. You're ready. So you got to choose some really good thoughts, and you got to get your head in the game. All right? So I also said you need to be able to not only recognize, but also be willing to change those negative thoughts. There are some people who like anxiety, believe it or not. They're sort of addicted to it, and they say, oh, it makes me do better. I haven't seen that actually happen. It is good, again, to put pressure on yourself, to get yourself engaged, concentrated, focused. But you don't want to be creating all that anxiety because it is seriously not helping you. It's not giving you your best performance. So, how many people have frozen on a test? What does that feel like? That sucks, right? Do you know what's happening? All right, so most of the time whenever we're feeling that, what's happening is that we get flooded with the anxiety. So we're no longer using sort of this part of the brain, which is what we need in order to be able to guess what? To do what? That's our higher order thinking. What might you need that for? Take a test. Instead, you get shifted back here to your more primitive brain, which wants to run away. I can assure you, you won't do well if you run out of the room. So you need to be able to stay here. So what people do is they either fight, they freeze, or they flee. Most of you, whenever you've blanked out, you froze. It's like the anxiety created this lockdown on the information, and you couldn't access it. Now, how many have walked out of an exam and say, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later, you're walking along and you start to remember the information that you couldn't remember? Does that happen? That's what happened. It was like the anxiety finally came down, and now you could get to the information. So that's what I'm saying. Work on it now to control the anxiety so that doesn't happen. So deep breathing is going to be a really good thing for you guys to do. Deep breathing kind of does this very easy way of short-circuiting the physiological response to anxiety. So when we're going into fight or flight, we're breathing shallowly, we have less oxygen, everything's getting tight. Like I said, we're ready to run. Taking deep breaths, taking in 10 deep breaths. Inhale for 10 seconds, maybe hold it for 5 to 7 seconds, and then exhale 5 to 7 seconds. Something like that, whatever feels comfortable for you. You'll start to calm down. Your body will start to ease and just relax. That's where you want to be. Really important. I also said here, choose positive thoughts. So if you're willing to change your negative thoughts and give up being anxious and pick positive thoughts, have a good attitude, things will go better for you. So how many dread tests? So what is it about tests that you dread so much? Why are they so scary?
I think the idea of the test is so much.
You don't know how you'll perform.
And why does that matter? So worrying about grades, worrying about the evaluation. How many people compare themselves to others? Oh yeah. I think it's a disease here at Wake Forest. It's a really bad one. So what I tell people is, stay in your own lane, run your own race. It's just you and the test. It's just you and the material. But if you take on the attitude that what you're trying to do is just see what you know, you're partnering with your professors. All you're trying to do is see how well have I mastered the material, not beat everybody else around me. That's irrelevant, honestly. Just run your own race. See how well you know it. Then you'll be able to reflect and see, okay, I got to work on that. Great. Do that the next time. Study in between and prepare. So I put in here lean in. How many people have skied, downhill ski? Okay, so for you, if you're going to ski, what's sort of the idea in order to do well to ski down the mountain? Do you want to lean forward or lean back?
Forwards.
You want to lean forward. That can be scary, right? Because you're actually like launching yourself down the mountain. But that's actually the best way to get down, the way you can have the most control. If I lean back, I'm going to have a yard sale. Skis are going to be everywhere. I'm probably going to take out other people. I have no control. So the more you can think about the exam like you're just leaning into it, you're approaching it, you want it, the better. The more you're leaning away from it like, this scares the crap out of me, the more you're probably going to have a yard sale whenever it comes to the test. Does that make sense? So notice whether you're having the sense of avoidance that scares the crap out of me, or whether it's not a big deal, I'm just going to prepare, I'm going to lean in. I'm going to go for it. Just partnering. Other things I talk about are meditation. Meditation is really this whole idea about focus, mindfulness, staying present, and learning how to control where your mind is going to take you. So again, this is a habit that you want to cultivate now. Start working on it so that you feel like, all right, I see I'm getting a little distracted, I'm going away. How can I bring my thoughts back to where they need to be? Just gives you more control. Visualization is a good place. So if you're feeling a little anxious, you can think about the most beautiful place you've ever been, or the place that feels the most relaxing. And you can put yourself for a few minutes there, or a few seconds, if that's all you feel like you have in the middle of an exam. And we'll talk more about these things and give you more suggestions, but I also mentioned that you have a couple resources on campus, just off the top of my head, places that can help you, because sometimes people may feel like the anxiety is a little too high for me to manage on my own. Not a problem. There are plenty of us on campus who can help you. Besides your professors, you also have the counseling center, and they're running a mindfulness group out of there. So it's a great way to learn how to practice that, and it's just a great situation. Along with individual work that you can do with a counselor. Also, the student health service. If you sort of have been dealing with anxiety for most of your life, it may be that you need a little medication to kind of bring that down in order for you to do some of these strategies. So I encourage you to think about that. And then, of course, the LAC. We deal with this all the time. So we can talk specifically about how it's affecting you, what's going to be best for you, because not everything works for everyone. So we need to find what works for you. So, as I said in the beginning, the source of the stress and the pressure is you, and that's actually good news, because you get to use all these strategies and the ones that Dr. Shuman talked about in order to really kill these exams. Just be willing to engage, be consistent, and go after it. All right? All right.
out. We had that page at the very beginning where we had I am the most anxious about. Turn to that page. Everyone have that page? I want you to grab it. And grab it. I want you to rip.
Change. Cool, man.
Don't rip it in half. That might feel good. It's okay if it happens. Okay, I have a beaker of beer. Okay? What I want everyone to do is I want you guys to deposit your fears inside a beaker of beer. Leave it behind. And we're going to discuss more of those